a feeble attempt to sound intelligent and asking you questions here, I had a little look at what people say about leadership, which is what I'd like to move on to just briefly. I look intelligent as well now. I got a couple that I just, this is to try and define what your views of leadership are. Kissinger, whoever he is now, said that he thought leadership was about getting people from where they are to where they have not been. Buchan said it's to elicit greatness that's already there. And Colin Powell said that great leaders just simplify, go through the argument and debate and doubt, and offer a solution that everyone can understand. There's an awful lot of vague and complexity of different things in there. But do you have a sort of summation of what you think? We will assume, because it's not worth going into the argument, that all leaders are born, because that's clearly not true. Or is it? And what are the essences that you look for? Because I'm thinking that in this process where you say you ask people to say who they are, there must be a self-fulfilling prophecy that some will join in and be very open and therefore show willingness to go on to become leaders and others won't. But what is it that you think is the hallmark of somebody who will become a leader? Not just a good boss manager, but somebody who leads.
We have very simple statements, really, and Patch, I'd rather you didn't kick me too much in the neck.
Patch has his own views on leadership.
Yes, he obviously did. Yeah. He obviously thought I was about to say something he didn't agree with. The first thing I'd say is leadership is not about just developing self, it's about developing others. You can be great, you can be inspirational, you can get the troops to follow you, but unless you teach them how to do it themselves or allow them to do it for themselves, then there's going to be a bit of a problem when you disappear. So it's not just about being a great leader, it's about developing others. The other thing that I think probably gives an indication as to where I would see leadership being different is if you compare the way I view the difference between management and leadership. For me, outstanding managers drive people to perform at the highest level they're capable of. So they're pushing performance, but it's more about control. Outstanding leaders inspire them to do it for themselves. That's more about freedom. Now, yes, I do believe that anybody is capable of being a great leader. It's interesting, the first quote you had there was one word that I heard that I think it said getting people to be. Getting has an implication that you're there in control, getting them to do it.
Absolutely.
And that would always make me uncomfortable as a word around leadership, because to me it's about inspiring them to do it for themselves. So when you look at leadership, I think that there's three components to it. I think that it's about how you choose to think, and I can come back to this.
Yes.
It's about understanding responsibility at a fundamentally different level to the way most people understand responsibility. And it's about how you communicate. Those three things link together. You cannot look at any of them in isolation. It isn't possible. So it's really beginning to say those three things are fundamental to being a great leader. Now, all of those things are capable of being developed. Absolutely capable of being developed. The only thing, of course, that isn't in there and is key is, do you want to be a leader?
Absolutely.
So if at the beginning you don't necessarily want to be a great leader, then it doesn't really matter. So is anybody capable of it? I absolutely fundamentally believe they are, because I believe that anybody and every person, whatever their background, whatever their experience in life to date, is capable of being who they want to be. Doesn't matter where they come from, doesn't matter what their background is, if they want to and if they choose to do it.
Okay, I understand that, and I understand that you can you can encourage people, you can enable people, you can empower people. What about motivation? I mean, you said earlier that some people just wouldn't want to be a great leader. I'm really happy where I am, being the person I'm doing a job that I love, and I don't really want to go from there. I don't want to become, responsible for everything else. But what about the motivation of those who are very, very ambitious? And do you reach the point, it's a tricky question, do you reach the point where somebody's got all of the ambition and the drive and the ego, but not necessarily the ability to encompass or embrace everything that's in your training program to fulfill that role? What happens to those people who are, and we all come across them in sort of junior management, the young Turks, as they say, I'm going to run this company because I'm aggressive, I'm a bully, I'm so forth, who've got all the drive but not necessarily the complete character set that you need to be a proper leader, a true leader.
To me, what you're describing there is not going to in any way prevent them from being successful. But
No,
from what you're
exactly.
describing, that's more about management than leadership. That's more about pushing and driving performance, which, let's be honest, can work. It's very successful. But the only problem is that if you're continually driving performance, when you step away, who's going to pick up the reins?
Yes.
And that's when you're likely to have a bit of a challenge. One of the questions I will often ask people when on a programme is I'll ask people and say to them, tell me something, do you believe that it's your role to motivate your guys? Do you believe it's your role? And probably about 80% of them will say, yes, I think so. And I say, I fundamentally disagree with you. I really don't think it is. Because if you believe that your role is to motivate other people, then think about it for a moment. You're saying that they are now dependent on you
Yes.
to motivate them. What's going to happen if you're not there? I don't believe that is your role. I think your role is to inspire them to motivate
Yes.
themselves. And there's a difference. Now, that's where you have to look at those three things together. Because if you believe that your role is to inspire them to motivate themselves, but your communication style is one where when people come to you with a problem, you give them the solution.
Yes.
Where they come to you for advice and you give them the advice as to where they might choose to look or what is the learning they need to income or whatever it is. The reality is that all the ideas and suggestions are coming from you. You're not encouraging them to think for themselves. You're encouraging them to come to you next time they have a problem. So that again is how do you communicate? Do you largely use the words I or are you using the words you?
Yes.
The other thing is if you're telling them what to do, you are taking responsibility for their performance rather than getting them to take responsibility. So that's where the three of those things link together. You cannot look at them in isolation. It isn't possible. But so many people believe that leadership is about inspiring people to follow them by telling them what to do. That's management,
Yes.
in my book.
Yes.
That's not leadership.
It is all about, therefore, empowerment. It's this thing about responsibility again, isn't it? You are responsible for what you do, but you also have the decisions. So I'm one of these aspiring young Turks in a corporation, and I have hopes to be a leader one day. I'm lucky enough to get on one of your courses. What do I expect? How would you describe the course to me? What's it all entail?
Well, to start with, you probably would know little about the programme when you tip up, because most people who arrive, they're told they're going on a leadership programme, and they haven't got a clue what they're doing there. So that's always kind of interesting. Mostly, clients don't quite understand what it's about. They just want to do a pilot. But if I tell you a bit about the programme, it's 3 days. It's 2 days consecutively,
Yes.
gap of about 3 weeks and a one-day follow-up. And the majority of the learning is on the first 2 days. The day 3 there is learning, but it's also a consolidation and a recognition of change. So on the first day, the introductions can take quite a while. It can take most of the money. We position what they're going to be learning
Yes.
in the very beginning, and getting them to recognise it's not just about changing the organisation. It's how do you change the behaviours and attitudes of the people within it, because most organisations, especially with having been through some of the trauma of the recession recently and all of those good things, they begin to think we've got to change the organisation, we've got to centralise, decentralise, cut costs, get rid of people, all of this good stuff.
Yes.
And of course, on paper, looking as though you're going to do that looks great. That'll work. That'll get us back on track. They forget they've got to take the people with them.
Yes.
So how do you get people to fundamentally shift the way they think so that you can take people with you?
Yes.
So we give them positioning about what the programme's about. And we're doing the introductions. And then we get them actually to discuss responsibility to see if they have any perception about really what responsibility means. And what they don't know is while they're doing that, we're actually measuring their communicating behaviour. So when I said earlier, do they use more I or more you?
Yes.
They would believe, if you asked them, that they used a lot more you, because most people are very caring. Most people really are interested in other people. But when they see their communicating behaviour, they nearly always go into shock. It's something between 90 and 100% I. And of course, this was part of my learning when, at the age of 50, I began to really shift the way. So if you think about it, when you care about somebody a lot, you're apt to want to help them, and you help them by wanting to give them advice. I look back over when I was bringing my children up. I adored my children. I absolutely adore them. And I'd made so many mistakes in my life, I didn't want them to make the same.
Yes.
So I spent all my time advising them.
Yes.
Worst thing I could have done, because I was teaching them how not to be responsible.
Yes.
So in measuring their communicating behaviour, we give them an insight to how they communicate. Normally that's shock horror. They can't believe it. But because we do it in a way that's saying, let's give you the reason why you probably do it because you care,
Yes.
it's an easier pill to swallow.
Okay. I can understand that.
But that's the first insight into recognising how responsibility and communication link together. And we get them after lunch to have, we do show them a model around responsibility. So they've got something to hang their hat on, and we give them examples and stories to help it come alive. And that's where I will share how I learnt.
Yes.
So we're getting them to recognise, I'm a perfect example of how to screw it up.
Yeah.
You know, so saying, recognise what it means. We get them to have another discussion after lunch, which is all around motivation and, you know, do we understand it and so on. And in the afternoon, we take them through models, and they're not new models. The models of themselves are irrelevant. It's the messages behind them.
Yes.
And all the time we're taking them through that, we're linking those three things. How you think, responsibility, communication. All the time that thread keeps running through. And we keep coming back to, might this be more leadership? Might this be more management? Never are we saying to people, this is how you have to be. We're showing them thoughts and ideas, and they have the choice about whether they want to do something with it or not. And we do that until quite late in the afternoon. And early evening, we move on to taking it a bit further to say action's only as good as the thinking behind it. So if in any way your thinking is distorted or dysfunctional, then there's a high possibility you're going to make some pretty lousy decisions.
Yes.
And we then say, what do you need to have in place? And when you recognise what you need to have in place, we realise that the way we live our lives, we actually don't have it in place. So actually making decisions is something that maybe we could do things differently and enable ourselves to make rather higher quality decisions.
What are the sort of things that we need in place that most people don't have? Just
Being listened to.
being listened to.
Because the minute somebody starts talking, saying, this is what I think I'll do, we leap in and start giving them advice as to how that you need to do it. The other thing, and this is why my thinking was so poor, that a lot of the time, one of the things we need to have in place is to actually feel valued, feel that we are okay. And yet, again, if we care about people, a lot of the time we want to tell them where they're getting things wrong so that they can focus on that, improve it and become better. Whereas the reality is, if I said to you, Tony, do you know, the way you ask me questions is so bloody brilliant.
I'd be forced to agree.
Which is absolutely...
I know.
But you'd want to go on developing your
indeed.
questioning.
Yeah.
Rather than if I say, Tony, hang on a minute, you know, I really don't like the way you ask questions. What I get you to focus on is what is not good about you. The risk is you actually develop more of what's not good rather than what is good.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's getting people to recognise that sometimes the best will in the world, we're doing things in a way that's entirely not useful. So that would be an example. We then wind up at the end of the day and we go around the room getting everybody to say something they really value and appreciate about the person next door to them.
Yeah.
They may have never met them before and they've only observed them during the day.
During the day, yeah.
Is beginning to recognise, A, how uncomfortable they find it to do it.
Steady badge.
I know, he's going to fall on the floor in a minute. Is, you know, that they don't find it comfortable, and that's a bit of a wake-up call. And how observant are they about noticing things that people do well and things they value about them. So that's an interesting exercise. And their homework is we get them to telephone somebody that evening and appreciate them. And that's fascinating, some of the things that happen. So the next morning you can guess that, you know, what we're getting them to do is give us feedback, what they took from the day before and how their homework went and what they learnt from it. And that's just fascinating, some of the insights that people get in doing that. We then basically, by examples, by stories, by reinforcing things, but in a slightly different way, we build on the things that we did the day before. And then we get them to do an exercise which is about what are the beliefs and behaviours that you're seeing in your own organisation. So what do you think are the beliefs that people have in your organisation? What are the behaviours you're seeing that tell you that's true? And getting them to recognise that you can't change somebody else's belief. All you can change is your own behaviour that may lead them towards having a different belief. So we basically then ask them, so what are you going to do differently to begin to impact the people you work with? It could be your colleagues, your team. And bear in mind, we get a lot of people coming on the programme who aren't necessarily in a business. So they'd be thinking about something slightly different. The last thing we get them to do on that day is a vision for their life. A lot of people don't have a vision for their life and they may be missing an opportunity there, and getting them to recognise the opportunity they may be missing. When they come back 3 weeks later, it's collecting everything that they've done differently. And the message that then comes through, that's probably one of the most important messages of all, is they may have seen some very significant changes. And the fascinating thing is a lot of them have seen bigger changes at home than the workplace. And that is really interesting. And what we're able to demonstrate to them absolutely critically, this is probably the most important message of all, is they've gone back and in those intervening 3 weeks, they've focused on changing themselves, not changing other people. And in changing themselves, they've seen different results. That gives them the hard, absolute clear evidence that leadership is not about changing other people. Leadership is about changing me.
It's interesting you say they take it home with them. This have presumably some interesting, because it is a totally cathartic experience that you're describing. You're unlocking people's ability to look at themselves and their lives and their circumstances and how they influence those. So presumably that then goes beyond the workplace as well.
Oh, way beyond the workplace. I mean, some of the things that give me the biggest buzz of all is when somebody comes back and says, "Do you know, I don't quite get what's happened, but my little 2-year-old son is a pain in the butt, and normally he's on the naughty step 3-4 times a night. Since I've been on this programme, he's only been on it once in 3 weeks. What's happened?" And that can give me as big a buzz as anything in the workplace. Or, you know, somebody says, "I had the most horrendous relationship with my mother, and she was always criticising me, and because I've handled it differently, it seems to have stopped entirely." And a lot of people will say, "It's changed my home life first." Or, you know, "It's changed me in such a way and I see it coming over into the workplace." But if it changes your home life, it impacts how you behave at work anyway.
Absolutely, yes.
So we then do, on that day, we do an exercise around values, getting people just to have a look at it and understand it differently. We get them to look at life balance, because so many people... Whoops! You're right, Patch.
That was life unbalanced.
It was, definitely unbalanced. A very appropriate moment to fall off. So we get them, first of all, to take responsibility and say, you're choosing to work long hours. You're choosing to be in an environment that you say forces you to do this. No, it doesn't. You have choices. So we do life balance, and then we get them to make some very conscious decisions. But it is just common sense.
It is. This thing, I mean, just one example about, you work awfully long hours is part of this sort of this self-analysis process, this sort of personal inventory, if you like, that your course encourages. There is the old adage, isn't there, about the people who work terribly hard so they look good. And either they're very hard workers or they're actually not very good at their job, and you could do it in half the time. Is this the sort of thing that also falls out of the program, where people look at themselves and say, actually, I don't need to do this, I should be doing it another way, or I don't have to prove this. Is that a thing, that I don't have to continually prove the things that I don't need to prove? Does it enable people to, as we discussed earlier with your very own past, you know, to be able to have more confidence and worth in themselves?
I think it does. You see, one of the things, and I often get asked by people, what is it about this program? Because if you look through the workbook or anything, you'd say, is this really different? And they say, what the heck is it that causes this extraordinary change in people who come on the program? Because one of the things, and I can feel my discomfort when you ask the question about self-analysis, because I went on a lot of programs in my, you know, at the age of 50 when I was trying to change, I went on some of the ones that probably it's better I don't name them, because I always took something from them.
Yes.
But some of them were real self-analysis, and they took you to places that had you feeling really uncomfortable. And basically, in some instances, they took people apart and then put them back together. However, they didn't put everybody back together. And that's what really scared the shit out of me. I thought it was inappropriate. But I don't think, and this is, I'm trying to articulate why I'm uncomfortable with this question. In a strange kind of way, it is self-analysis, but it doesn't feel like self-analysis. It's not taking people to a level of discomfort. And I don't know how the hell we do that.
How about removing blinkers then?
That's probably a better way of describing it. And because all the time on the program, people have the choice about how open they are, whether they want to buy into it or not. I don't know what it is. It's self-analysis if you choose it to be self-analysis.
Objective self-analysis. Is it the case also that as we develop, everybody is conditioned by experience? And indeed the whole subject of today is being conditioned by experience and learning and growing from it. Is it the case that also in my own history, I grew up with preconceptions because of the work that I did. This is how I have to be. This is how I should besport myself. This is how my reaction should be. This is how I should treat the public. You know, this is how I should treat our customers. All of these things are sort of perceived attitudes. So is it true to say we don't like self-analysis, but in removing the blinkers, you take the rules away, you take those preconceptions away and say, let's look at it again. How do I feel about me? How do I feel about my boss? How do I feel about those who work for me? How do I feel about my customers and so forth? And reanalyze that. My wife, my children, my dogs, in the same essence.
I think it is, and I think it's helping people recognise that a lot of the time we're driven by the shoulds, must, ought tos and got tos. And being able, and a lot of people come back and say, the biggest impact for me is choice, recognising that I have a choice in each and every moment, a choice in how I respond to anything, a choice about where I choose to be, what I choose to do. You know, it's really giving people back the ability to choose. And I find it nearly impossible to, even now, having run as many programs as I have, having had all these, what is it about the program? I'm damned if I know. There's something about the linking, you know. And when I put this program together, which was, you know, I say this often, I used to smoke at the time, but I say on the back of a fag packet, I'm not sure I knew what the hell I was doing. And I swear to God the program was given to me, because when I ran the first program, which was a very small group of 6 people, and it had a mixture from a chief executive through to a housewife going through a crisis. You know, it was 6 people run from home. And by the way, where I was living at the time, I had 9 Jack Russells. So I was endeavouring to keep them quiet at the same time, which was hilarious. But the person who was head of all training for Sun Microsystems at that time said at the end of the 2 days, Penny, that 2 days has just changed my life. And I went, oh, great. I hadn't got a clue why. It took me a year to even begin to understand why it was having the impact. And, you know, for anybody watching this, they may think, you know, very odd. But I swear to God that program was given to me. It was a bit like, you know, the universe saying, listen, get out there, here's the program, you know, don't matter if you don't understand it, just do it. You're behind schedule, get on with it.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's clients today, and some of my really best clients, and I'm talking about really big organisations, not insignificant organisations. It doesn't matter where that chief executive moves to, where he or she is headhunted to, into another organisation, they would take me with them. And it's not because of me, it's because that programme changes people. It changes them. It changes the culture to a leadership culture, and it does it unbelievably quickly.
Yes.
And they would take me wherever they go because of that programme. It's amazing.
There's the old adage that everybody wants to learn, but nobody wants to be taught. Is this kind of the almost like magic dust that you're able to sprinkle? This is occurring to me that it's training, yes, but it's also facilitating at a very great level, isn't it? You're facilitating people to take a look and take stock of what they are, what they do, how they think, what their perceptions are, what their priorities are, what their values are. You say you ask them to look at the company values. Presumably they look at their own values and standards and... Yeah.
And it's just a case of looking and saying, who do I want to be?
Because they would never think or be able to do that on their own. Is it almost a sort of a quasi-psychological approach, isn't it, that teases out people from themselves to look at their own personal bigger picture?
Tony, it could be. You see, this is I find these questions really difficult to answer because I don't bloody know.
Stop me asking them, you know.
But I really do not know. It amazes me the impact it has. You know, and I was having dinner with one of my most special clients the other evening, and he looked at me and said, Pen, you change people. You change people. And I just think, Christ, it is amazing. And, you know, he will say, he said, unbelievably powerful program. And yet it's, Tony, it's common bloody sense. There's nothing new. It's just... There's a way of linking it that get people to say, how do I really want to be? I mean, I tell you one thing that's been interesting for me. I remember it's been said to me a couple of times when they've talked to me about the programme. And I've said, you have to recognise one thing. I've never been on my programme. And that's odd.
Yes.
So I've never experienced it. But I do know that the people who work with me, who train the programme today, will all say they live their life in a different way.
Yes.
Each and every one of them.
Yeah, yes. Is it something that it occurs to me, is it only available then to the sort of corporate elite? And presumably, we said that some people take it home. Presumably there'd be an awful lot of people other than the corporate greasy pole climbers, so to speak, who would benefit from the same sort of programme. How available is it?
Well, now, you see, this is an interesting one, because when I first designed this programme, I thought, there's a plus and a minus to this. The best news is there's nobody alive who wouldn't benefit from going on the programme. Nobody. The bad news is there isn't anybody alive who wouldn't benefit from this. So how the bloody hell do you market it? You know, it's not easy. And I had to make a choice where I would actually market it. And I decided that going into the corporates is where it had the biggest opportunity of changing the most amount of lives. People go to work, they also go home, how are they going to treat their partners differently, and so on. So I decided to do that. However, my passion is also to get into other places. And for example, we did it, I make no bones about it, at cost completely, and took it into a primary school that was going into special measures by taking all the teachers through it. It was about to go into special measures. It's now winning awards everywhere. We're now working with a secondary school, which is in a fairly deprived area, and he's passionate about it. We've taken all the teachers through, and they've now trained one of their teachers to be able to roll it out through, which is through. And we also ran a programme for a group of 16-year-olds, which was, I'd have to say, it was amazing, the impact and the way they reacted. And I went and asked them afterwards the impact it had on them, and just listening to them it excited me beyond anything. We've now got that teacher beginning to take it through some of the 16-year-olds, and I believe they're going to start offering it to some of the parents as well. We
Yes.
we do it at a hell of a lot less money because schools don't have money.
No.
So the license fees and everything, we reduced everything to put it within their budget because it's what I care about. We also do programs for nothing, and all of our trainers give their time for nothing into the NSPCC. We can't directly get to the children for obvious reasons, but we can get to the people who work with them. So we do that on a regular basis. We've had some of our clients run programs for the partners, for the wives. There's, we have housewives coming through some of the open programs. We have, and let me be really honest about this, recognise that I don't have any qualifications to do what I do today. None, zero. I have the best qualification to be an outstanding leader of all. I'm a mother. If you think of the skills
And
that's
you've had 9 Jack
required.
Russells.
If you think of the skills that a mother needs, they're incredible.
Yeah.
They need problem solving, they need negotiating, they need planning, prioritising. They need so many different skills. Those are all the skills of a leader. So, there's nobody alive. So because we work very much in the corporate arena, there aren't going to be many housewives who are going to be wanting to come through programs, a lot of corporates. But we have a lot of trainers out there who run what we'd call open programs for groups such as that. So, it's a huge plus. There's nobody anywhere, and I've had teenagers come through my program, and there's nobody alive who wouldn't gain something that would enable them to step into more of the potential they already have.
Yes.
There is nobody. And that's a huge plus, but it makes it less easy to sell because people say, what is your marketplace? Well, the world.
Absolutely, anybody, yes.
We've taken it, it's been translated into German, Slovakian. We're just in negotiation with translating to French, Spanish, Italian. It's been taken out, it's been rolled out in America, Canada, Asia, so the Far East, the Middle East, South Africa, Australia, and Europe, obviously. So it's amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
Amazing.
I had a quick look at your list of clients, which reads like a who's who of international industry. But I'm getting the feeling that, firstly, you said earlier that a lot of your clients sort of go with you. So there's presumably, what I'm trying to get at here in a roundabout way is that you have made a point about having no qualifications. We have spent a lot of time, I think, looking at the motivations and the experiences from which you draw that spawned, if you like, this whole process. But clearly the qualification is that people from these vast companies keep following you around. Is that a general thing? Is that they kind of move with you and take them to change other companies or to influence other companies as well as they move?
Yes, I think that is right. If there's a CEO who moves on, is headhunted to another company, there's nothing in any business that the foundation of having the culture you want isn't leadership. You need leadership everywhere. And there's one of the CEOs who's just moved to a group position in another company, been headhunted into there, and very recently, only started about a month ago. And he was on the phone to me yesterday saying, right, okay, Pen, here we go. We're going to take it in and we're going to do it quicker this time. We're going to do it. Because last time he almost piddled around at it. It's almost though he didn't quite get it.
Yeah.
How impactful it could be, and it was only in the last year that he did, and then he said, my God, I wish I'd done this quicker.
Yeah.
So this time it is going to be done quicker.
And we have spent a lot of time talking about leadership because but I'm getting the feeling, you said earlier, who could benefit from this? Everybody, that both being the problem both ways around. How does it indeed? And if so, how does it cascade down through the business? So, if I'm just a young intern in this vast corporation with great aspirations for the future, is the training available at that lower level for me? How do I sort of start learning the essences of what the course offers, the program offers?
Well, if you get somebody like one of the clients we're working with now, which is actually in America and Canada, he decided he wanted to start at the top, and which is the place ideally you start. So what he did was he was a bit stropped about it and said, Penny, I know you might be standing back, but I want you personally to do me, my team, and the president's team. So I said, yeah, okay. So I did. But then we took it, I think, through the top 250 people with our trainers doing it. Now, bear in mind, one of the messages we're teaching is responsibility.
Yes.
So it would be entirely inappropriate if we then said, we'll go on training your people, because it's saying, we're teaching responsibility, but give us responsibility, which is entirely inappropriate. Yes. It means we get wealthy and send a message goes right against
yes.
what we're teaching.
Yes.
So what we then do is we will train people within that organisation how to deliver the programme, and then they will deliver it under licence to us. And the 3-day programme looks an easy programme to run. It actually isn't terribly easy, and it takes 10 days to learn how to run it. 2 gaps of 5 days, and we'll only take small groups of 6 at a time. Now, I think we've now trained about 60 people within this particular organisation, which is a lot. And they want to take it down through every single human being in that organisation. Now, the reality is if you're starting to take either, it doesn't matter if it's people on the shop floor in a manufacturing, it doesn't matter if it's people working in shops, it doesn't matter if it's your engineers, it doesn't matter if it's call centre, to realistically take somebody out of the business for 3 days is a far bigger cost than the cost of the programme.
Absolutely.
So we are just now launching a version that we've just spent about 2 months working on, and we are designing a 1-day version to give people enough of the insight, enough of the skills, enough of the ability and the way of, remember, thinking, responsibility, communication, to be able to really shift, and then they will have the option to be able to go on to further development if they want to. But that is going to be rolled out throughout everywhere. We won't be doing it. We'll do the pilots, but we will not do any more than that. Then the organisation will be doing it under licence to us.
And presumably you supply the organisation with the necessary collateral. And,
correct. That's all part of the licence fee. Yes. So,
and at that level, with 1-day course, presumably then it's up to the individual to decide how far they want to pursue it.
Correct.
So it becomes a sort of self-qualification in a way, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
It does. So that's how we do it, and we encourage. The thing that has been truly amazing for me, and this only started to happen about 2 years ago, with one of our clients, and again it was somebody who'd moved on to a different, a much bigger division, but within the same organisation, and they asked me to go and run the programme for them and their new top team over in Germany, which I did. They then said, we've decided we want to roll it out throughout the entire division, and it's a very big division in terms of financial number, but small in terms of people. Big product. And I said, okay, so who are you going to want to deliver the training? Because we might need to run another programme with you, selecting some people. And he said, no, Pen, you don't understand. He said, I am going to be one of the trainers and 3 of my directors. To have a managing director deliver training into a factory, unheard of.
I would say very enlightened, actually. But
incredible to have people of that level. The impact was extraordinary. He said, no. He said, I want to know that I'm getting the feedback. I'm telling people this is the culture we want. You now tell me if I'm getting it wrong. Since then, we've had some other CEOs go through, CEOs, directors, and...
So having managing directors taking over the training is fantastic. Presumably they would get an awful lot of feedback then from their employees, the people who are trained, as to how effective it is. But what I'm interested in is, this is great now, we have an awful lot of people, 40,000 plus, having benefited from this. So we've got an awful lot of very super potential leaders and employees. But it's not surely about that as well. How do the companies, the big corporations that employ you, justify it further than continuous personal development and bringing on leaders? There must be bottom line benefits too. This is all about making a company more efficient, isn't it? This is all about making it run better, smoother, more efficiently, and ultimately, presumably, more profitably.
There's no question. They're not gonna keep having me back if it's, let's all be nice to each other and let's do this, but there's no bottom line impact. There is. One of the things that happens consistently is employee engagement goes up really dramatically. In one instance, in one division, it went up 16% in months. Quite extraordinary. And in, again, one of the big corporates, one managing director, who now takes me wherever he goes, he said employee engagement went up 16%. I think they came in number 2 best companies to work for and the highest performing division by a mile. So, you know, those results are not insignificant. There's always going to be a challenge. People call these soft skills. They're not soft, they're bloody hard, but they're called soft skills. But for example, in this company that we're working with in Canada and America, one of the divisions was one of the first divisions to take it down very deep, very fast. And when I had dinner with the CEO, he said, "Pen, guess which division is beginning to get the fastest results?" That division. So there's no question you see improvement in performance. So they're not going to do it. They're not going to just say this is nice to do. So if you get, and I can't remember this particular leader's words exactly, but he said, if you get the people right, no question, if you get the people right and get them working the right way, you have happy people, you end up with happy customers,
Yes.
you end up with profitability.
Yes.
So that's the way he thinks of it, that you get the people sorted first, you get them, whatever you like to think about it, taking ownership, whatever.
Yes.
They're then going to give improved service to the customers. That's going to lead you to bottom line profit.
Of course.
And because you get them seeing that again and again and again. And the CEO I was talking to yesterday, he said, "Pen, to get the results that I need," he said, "I see the role I've just stepped into, and having looked at the company, I see it as a turnaround situation." He said, "I doubt if my directors would agree with me. I see it as a turnaround situation." And he said, "Pen, we're going to need to do this together. This is about leadership at every level."
It must also, though, address one of the other huge problems that corporations face, and that is the investment they have in their people, and then those people moving on to other corporations. Surely there must be, I can't really say staff stickiness at that level, but you know what I mean, being able to... There was a survey not long ago in America, I think it was, and one of the things that came out was that more senior but younger people were saying that having internet freedom was as important to salary from them, in as much as to say that the quality of the job you have is now beginning to be just as important as the amount you get paid for it. So that the essence of having your course and being in an environment where your course is being effective, where the program is being effective, must mean that people will be more enthusiastic about their company and stay there longer than they would have done previously.
I think that that may well be true, and I can say this because it's general, but one of the places we were asked to take it in was, and this is going back a bit, was the National Black Police Association across the UK. And part of the reason for us being asked to take it in was because of retention. So it's not just about creating the environment, it's taking ownership for creating the environment, creating the job you want. So it's on both sides. It's the organisation and it's the individual. So there's no question that it has a huge impact. We wouldn't be doing it otherwise.
No, obviously not.
We might be doing it to help individuals. We wouldn't be doing it to help organisations unless it had a huge bottom line impact.
Which leads me to, where does it all go next? You're already being translated into every language. You are the Tower of Babel of training. So once you've conquered the universe, where next is it for you?
I mean, I always said, and I used to be really nervous about saying this, I thought, you can imagine the not good enough kicked in again.
Yes.
I just want to change the thinking of the world. I suppose one of the things that I don't say very often, I get really pissed off when I look at the politics and things, and I hear the word responsibility being chanted around again and again and again. Oh, we need to get people to take responsibility. And the government don't even understand responsibility. You know, David Cameron talks about it a lot. But he doesn't understand it because they keep putting in more and more processes and systems, thinking that they'll drive people to perform differently or behave differently. Well, those very systems are saying, we don't think you're responsible enough to do it for yourself. So I suppose given a chance, I wouldn't, you know, I probably would love to be able to try and get somewhere into politics and say, for God's sake, it scares the hell out of me. In this country, we are teaching people how to be less and less responsible.
Absolutely.
And I think it's tragic. If you know, one of the things that I'd love to do is get further into schools. Why they don't teach this to young people before they leave school is completely beyond my comprehension, because I think it's fundamental. I think they need to be teaching people. They're not doing it. So there's a lot of places.
There's a lot of places to go yet.
To go.
Which I suppose means we ought to let you get on with your work. Penny, it's been a real pleasure, and thank you for having us and the cameras, and thank the dogs too for being so hospitable. And we wish you all the best for the future.
Tony, thank you very much indeed. It's been a delight. Thank you.